These 4 players will break out in fantasy this year. Do us a favor, go ahead and drop a like to show some love. Subscribe if you like fantasy football. And I want you to comment down below. Just pause the video before we start and tell us, who do you think is going to break out? Maybe they are on this list. And by the way, do you want some solid rankings for redraft, best ball, everything in between? Then go ahead and use our code LAND, L-A-N-D, when signing up at flockfantasy.com. Our code will get you 30% off your membership. And if you choose that Mother Flocker tier, there's a section where we can grade your redraft team and turn it into a video. Okay, let's talk about these 4 breakout players in fantasy this year. I will go first. We have 2 each.
That's
and my first player to talk to you guys about today is a player that I loved in Dynasty last year. Have so much of this player on my Dynasty squads. And I think this is the year he solidifies himself as a top 12, a wide receiver 1, if you will, in fantasy. That is Christopher Olave.
Love it.
And here's my problem, and this has been my problem for the entire year. Badake, you know this. Like, Garrett Wilson gets all the love. Garrett Wilson gets all the hype. Everyone talks about Garrett Wilson. They love Garrett Wilson. And meanwhile, Chris Olave is just like chopped liver. Like, nobody's talking about how damn good he was as well.
Yeah.
Look, I'm all aboard the Garrett Wilson breakout, but why is no one also, leading the train for Chris Olave? Maybe I need to be that person. I'm not sure. But yeah, there's been some people talking about him, but not enough. There's not enough respect on Chris Olave. Both had pretty awful quarterback play and both shined through it, right? You had Garrett Wilson, who is playing with Mike White, Zach Wilson, a combination of different players. You had Chris Olave, Jameis Winston. You had Andy Dalton for a little bit of time there. But everyone's giving Wilson the respect that he's due. I don't feel like there's enough people giving Olave that respect. And let's look at the per-game averages for these 2 players. And I want you to see how similar of years that they had. Because if you only look at their statistical season, then you'll say, okay, Garrett Wilson had a better statistical season. Well, Garrett Wilson played 2 more games than Chris Olave. Do you guys remember when Olave caught that touchdown, had the concussion, right? He had to sit out 2 games. But if you look at per game averages, Garrett Wilson versus Chris Olave, the targets, Garrett Wilson's, ahead by 0.7 targets per game. Receptions, 0.1 difference in the receptions per game. Yards, Olave has more yards per game. Olave has more touchdowns per game. Olave has a higher yards per reception. Olave has a higher ADOT. Drop percentage is very close. And then catch percentage, contested catch percentage is also very close. They had very, very similar years, similar statistical outputs, similar demand of their offense. Both are getting huge upgrades at the quarterback position, right? Wilson's getting the better upgrade and Aaron Rodgers, but both are getting upgrades because Chris Olave is going from Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston to now Derek Carr. Yeah. And we can hate Derek Carr as much as we want. You can clown on Derek Carr, but what Derek Carr has done since 2015 is provide very good fantasy output to his receivers, to his number ones. Let's look at, again, since 2015, last year in 2020, Devontae Adams, he made the wide receiver 3. And, obviously Adams is elite, right? But you can ask yourself, okay, how about Hunter Renfrow the year before? Because Hunter Renfrow was his number 1 target in 2021. Hunter Renfrow was a wide receiver 10. Then in 2020 and 2019, Darren Waller was a top 3 tight end, the number 1 target. In 2018, Jared Cook was tight end 5. In 2016, Michael Crabtree was a wide receiver 12, and Amari Cooper was a wide receiver 13. And then in 2015, again, that same core, both finished top 22. Derek Carr has 7 years of producing extremely relevant fantasy options, players that thrive when they are clear number ones. You saw that with Adams, Renfrow, Waller, and now we have Olave, who is the unquestioned number 1 on this New Orleans Saints team. And that's not an opinion, by the way. He is the number 1 on this team. If you honestly are still someone who is saying Michael Thomas is the number 1, you've been crying for the last 3 years saying Michael Thomas. Come on, let's wake up.
Come on.
Reality, smell the roses. Michael Thomas is not the feature in this offense anymore, and he's not a problem for Chris Olave. In case there's still people out there who claim that he is, this year, Michael Thomas will be 4 years removed from his last season where he spent majority of the games playing, not injured. In the last 3 seasons, Michael Thomas has played just 20% of the Saints games. 10 of 50 games. This team is well aware of who Michael Thomas is, and they know that they can't build a team around him. How could they at this point, honestly, given his history? But if you're still worried, let's look at the splits Chris Olave had with and without Michael Thomas. Keep in mind, Michael Thomas played the first 3 games, and then he was out for the rest of the year. And typically, the first 3 games is when you're seeing a rookie establish himself. We don't typically see any sort of huge numbers for a rookie until the second half of their rookie season. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase kind of ruined that mold, but typically we don't see rookies just out of the gate dominate. But let's look at these games. You can see in split, this is in split with Michael Thomas. There were 3 games, and then out of split without Michael Thomas. So in split, he had more PPR points per game. He had more receptions. He had more targets per game and more receiving yards per game. So as a rookie, Olave earned over 24% of his team's total targets and missed 2 games in the process. That would be hovering probably around the 28 to 30% mark if he didn't miss those 2 games. Keep in mind, guys, 24% of his team's targets he demanded as a rookie, but only 6 teams threw the ball less than the Saints last year. Enter Derek Carr, who has the Raiders top 5 in 2 years removed in pass attempts per game in the last 2 seasons. Derek Carr has known to be a quarterback who throws the ball quite often. I mean, we're only a couple, years removed from him at points being, leading passing categories with the Raiders. So you look at this offense, the low volume that they were under Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston. Enter Derek Carr. You can hate him, you can love him. What we do know is they will be more confident to pass the ball.
Yeah.
And I believe that Chris Olave is a lock for 140 targets in 23/24. So he is a must draft, and he absolutely will solidify himself as a wide receiver 1 in fantasy football this year.
Yeah, love the take. I mean, Chris Olave has been your guy since he kind of came in. So it's been awesome. I'm excited for this year.
Yep.
All right, my first breakout player is actually a running back, and that could be already controversial. Once again, y'all guys know me. That is James Cook. James Cook, obviously running back for the Buffalo Bills, currently running back 30 on Underdog right now. My RB 26, and I kind of want to remind you that James Cook, coming out of college, was a great running back. He was behind all these, I would say, decent Zamir White, Kenny McIntosh was still there at the time. Obviously, he just got drafted. So he didn't really get the workload on the ground. He was more of an air guy in college. But when you saw that and how he really was efficient in the air, it really translates to the NFL in a very minuscule way, surprisingly. But let me remind you once again, first year was very, very limited on the ground and in the air. 2020, only 91 attempts, over 500 yards, 2 touchdowns. And on the ground, only 21 receptions. And he didn't really get started until the second half of the season. He finished RB 44 this past year, and that was only 25% of the snaps, obviously, with Devin Singletary there at the time. And I think when you really look at that and you see the opportunities that he got and really break it down, there's some cool and interesting stats that I personally find I think is great. First in breakaway runs with 15 yards or more, which I thought was great. Second in true yards per carry. What is true yards per carry? You take away those big breakaway runs. You take away those screen passes or whatever the case may be that, there was bad defense, or it's a more realistic profile of what that run looks like, right? So you're not adding the 15 plus runs, you're not adding the 10 plus runs, you're adding the runs that were probably 7 yards and less, right? And he was second in true yards per carry with 5.8 yards per carry, which I think was awesome. Third in yards per touch, he averaged 5.6 yards per carry and 8.6 yards per catch, which I thought was really awesome. So that means if he caught the ball, he was averaging over a first down, essentially, which is great. Now, you think of the PPR opportunities with James Cook and what he's really stepping into. James Cook, in a lot of people's eyes, is not a do-it-all guy. In my eyes, he is. When he came in, I was like, I can see him being a first and second down guy and a pass-catching guy, kind of like his brother. But that's kind of not the way the Buffalo Bills want to use him. I think they do want to use him as a pass-catching back, a third down guy, which I believe he's going to be stepping into. Obviously, I kind of mentioned Devin Singletary earlier. He is gone now, and he's leaving behind 52 targets, which I believe is truly going to go to James Cook this year, and he could potentially see over 70 targets, which sounds absurd. But if you really look into it, when you take the receptions from both James and Devin, that adds up to 59 receptions, right? You don't look at the targets, you look at the receptions. James would have finished 6th in receptions and 4th in targets with 85 targets out of the running backs. Now, once again, there's so much extrapolation. There's so much what's that look like. I think what's exciting there is just the opportunity in general. And I think that's what I don't want to skew too much because, yeah, I can say, he could finish top 5 if he had all these numbers. Devin Singletary was a top 25 guy at the time. I think just him going into an opportunity and being one of the best catching backs on this roster, I think is exciting, right? Ooh, I'm out of breath. I mean, that's a good take. I'm loving it right now. So I do project Damian Harris really to step in. And I think a lot of people are saying, okay, what about Damian? He is going to step in, right? He's going to have a 60 to 40% workload, in my personal opinion. I think James Cook is not just going to be a third down guy. I think they're going to see a bit of rotation here. Damian Harris for sure is going to be a first and second down and even a goal line back. But also, people are also going to say, what about Josh Allen? And I think that is what's really important here, and especially in this high-powered offense. I think a lot of people are skeptical about that because of Josh Allen and Damian Harris. If you really break it down, which I went to go look at, and I said, okay, what's really happening here? The Bills were 8 in passing amongst wide receivers. I mean, amongst teams this past year, right? They threw the ball 8th out of all offenses. A lot of people would say, well, they don't run the ball much either. This is a high-powered offense. I agree. Actually, they were dead middle, 16th in rushing attempts, which is, once again, middle of the league, which I thought was pretty surprising because I was like, okay, this team is probably going to be bottom 5, maybe bottom 10. They're actually dead middle, which I believe they're going to continue to want to show this evenness, this fluidity with this offense, not just being a high-powered offense. Running the ball also helps you win games, and I think that is something that they're trying to understand without Josh Allen. Now, when you really break it down, people always say, well, Josh Allen always throwing to Stephon Diggs. He's trying to throw deep. He's actually 7th highest check down rate amongst quarterbacks in 2022. He was also tied with 5th in check down attempts over the past 2 years. So if you're saying that Josh Allen is not going to throw the ball to James Cook, he is. He has been. He has been throwing it to Devin Singletary and James Cook for the past, Devin Singletary for the past 2 years, now James Cook for going to be the next 2 years. So look, if you are really thinking about, hey, you're questioning, Josh Allen's not going to check the ball down. This is a high-powered passing offense, not going to run the ball. James Cook is not going to see the opportunity because Damian Harris is there. Actually, all those things are kind of brought up, and I think you can see the pathway for James Cook. Now, he may not be this top 10 guy, top 8 guy. My breakout here is the top 15. And I think that's really comfortable, especially for somebody who finished RB 44 this past year, who only sold 25% of the workload. So I can see a massive, massive finish here for James Cook. Once again, a top 15 finish, which I feel really comfortable to say, especially in the PPR formats. I'm really excited for James Cook.
Okay, James Cook. I mean, I've notoriously not been a James Cook guy. I kind of still feel that way, but I'm gonna let's see. Sure. I bet you there's people in the comments who agree with you. James Cook breaking out this year. Okay, the running back that I'm bringing on this list would be Rachaad White. Currently have him ranked as my RB24. Underdog ADP is RB26. But look, Rachaad, there's a lot of signs that are lining up towards a breakout for Rachaad White. Firstly, there's no competition in this backfield. I mean, he's being drafted around players who have multiple backfield mates who will play clear and obvious roles. Meanwhile, Rachaad White at RB26 is one of the few players there that has almost no competition. He was a huge buy for me all offseason in on our Dynasty channel. And I just kept hearing people say they're going to draft an impact running back. They're going to draft an impact running back. And I'm asking myself, why? This is clearly a rebuilding team. Rachaad White had a good rookie season, not incredible, but a good rookie season. Why would they go out and draft a running back? They didn't do it. They showed faith in Rachaad White. And here's his competition in 23. Chase Edmonds. How many teams was he on last year? How many times did he lose a job? Quite a few times. Keyshawn Vaughn. He's been on this team for a while now, right? He's not ever really been the feature. Patrick Laird. Do we talk about his history? And then Sean Tucker. Everyone in the Dynasty community's darling Sean Tucker, who I like, but let's be realistic. Sean Tucker is an undrafted free agent. It's unlikely that he has a very big role this year for this team. So let's be honest, looking at this depth chart, there really isn't an RB2 on this team. There's like 3 RB3s and 4s. Like there really isn't. So maybe they bring someone in. That still doesn't worry me because it's clearly a need for the team. They don't have that RB2. And look, the offensive line was rough last year, but I think they are much more healthy. Not only do I think, I know they are much more healthy heading into the 2022 season. They had a lot of injuries. A lot of things didn't go their way. So it can't be much worse than what it was last year. And most importantly, as we always say, opportunity is king. And Rachaad White, he's the definition of that this year. Opportunity is king. Was he efficient with his touches last year? Not really. Okay. Was that all his fault? No. Clearly, one of the worst offensive lines in the league last year with all the injuries. But he will drown in opportunities. And that's exactly what we want for a cheap starting running back in fantasy football. If you're going to do, let's say, anchor RB, you draft Bijan Robinson in the first round, Jonathan Taylor in the first round, and then you wait till like round 9 or so to draft your RB2. Rachaad White's the perfect player because of the opportunity he'll see. Volume is king. It's a small sample size, but let's look at what he did the one game he was the starter for this team in 2022. Rachaad White, Leonard Fournette split opportunities towards the back half of the season, but in the one game where Rachaad White did not have competition, where he was the number one, he had almost 20 PPR points, just under 23 total touches, 109 total yards. Now, that was a great matchup versus the Browns, so he should have smashed that matchup as a starter, and he had Tom Brady. But take away the matchup, take away Tom Brady, the touches still remain. Now, he might not be putting up 110 total yards every single game and 20 points per game, but this is someone who is a lock for 15 plus touches this year, and that alone makes him an absolute smash at his current ADP. And in PPR formats, he could be an absolute cheat code. This was what a lot of people, and myself in particular as well, when scouting Rachaad White coming out of Arizona State, the one thing you really notice about his game was his receiving abilities. It wasn't necessarily him as a runner, it was him as a receiver. And as a rookie, he had the 12th most targets amongst all running backs. Only 12 running backs had more targets than Rachaad White. He had more targets in his rookie season than Dalvin Cook, than James Conner, than Tony Pollard, than Najee Harris, than Travis Etienne, than Jonathan Taylor, and more. Now, when you lose Tom Brady, naturally, you're not going to be throwing the ball as much. However, we have reports that he's going to be heavily involved. There was that suspect report that was flowing out there where the quote was, Rachaad White, I'm going to see a lot of balls this year. You know, like there was that sus report out there. But the reality is he will be a focal point of this passing offense. He should see 4.5 targets a game. That's 76 targets over a year if he stays healthy for every single game. And keep in mind, let me put some claims, some backing to what I'm telling you, that he was one of the better receiving backs coming out of college. He was one of 7 running backs in his last college football season, one of 7 in college football, to have more than 45 targets on the year. Okay. In fact, he was 7th of 469 running backs that were tracked that year in college football, according to PFF, in targets. 7th of 469 running backs in college football in targets. And he was 3rd in receiving yards with 469 coming out of Arizona State his last year. Only Jahmyr Gibbs and Deuce Vaughn had more receiving yards that year in college. So I'm telling you something, and I'm backing it with all these claims. So I know there's a lot of people who might disagree with Rachaad White, but I don't see how the touches aren't there. And whether you like him or dislike him, I think we can all agree that the touches will absolutely be consistent for him as long as he stays healthy. He's a smash at his ADP, and I could see him breaking out this year.
Yeah, Rachaad White, I mean, stepping into good opportunity. Sean Tucker, be careful. Be careful with Rachaad White because Sean's coming out now. I love it. Yeah. I love it.
He's scared. He's scared.
I wish the best for Sean Tucker, and it didn't happen. And now he's behind Rachaad White, which is not what we all expected. But hey, I do agree. Love the take. Love the take. All right, my last guy here for this breakout, kind of similar to Chris Olave, That is Drizzy Drake London. I think this one's pretty obvious. I think a lot of people have been advocating for Drake London, and I love it. I love this opportunity. I can see so much happening here in 2023 for Drake London. But before we really get into it, let me remind you, coming out of USC and who he was with, I mean, had a phenomenal freshman year coming out of USC in 2019, and that was behind Michael Pittman and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I know this is not Dynasty, but just a quick, just to like have that in your mind. If you're not a big Dynasty player, that's who this guy was playing with at the time as a freshman, as an 18-year-old kid, with Michael Pittman and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then his second year, which is his sophomore year in college, he had more yards, if I'm not mistaken, more receptions as well than Amon-Ra St. Brown that year. That was the year Amon-Ra got drafted in the 4th round, which was absolutely crazy. Once again, doing that at 18 years old is phenomenal. Now, when you really think about this offense, look, this was probably one of the worst offenses to throw the ball last year. They were first in the run. Nobody ran the ball more than the Atlanta Falcons. And it's going to I don't think it's going to continue. I think it's going to change. The offense is going to change. And I'm not saying that they're not going to be maybe bottom 10 in the run offense, but I think having that big jump going to 8, 10, 11, I think that is a big jump for this offense, especially now with Desmond Ridder in. Let me remind you, Marcus Mariota was at quarterback for the most of the season until he got benched, if I'm not mistaken. And insert Desmond Ridder, who I absolutely love. I actually bought him in if I'm not mistaken, my must-holds as a must-hold dynasty quarterback, because I do believe he is going to have a good season, especially with this offense. Drake London, Kyle Pitts, now Bijan Robinson. There's still no one to compete in the wide receiver room specifically for Drake London. He was the person who led the team in targets with 117 this past year. I mean, the guy behind him was, I always butcher his name, Olamide Zacharias. Sorry if I'm butchering that, but that was the only Zacchaeus. That was the only guy, right? 117 targets, and the next guy, Zacchaeus, with 61 targets, which I think is kind of wild when you think about it. Now, when you really break it down, what I did, shout out to RotoViz, splits in and splits out, and this is with Desmond Ridder. Desmond Ridder showed what he can do those last 4 weeks of the season there. And he averaged more fantasy points per game, more receptions per game, more yards per game as well, compared to what he did with Marcus Mariota, which was the first 13 weeks of the season. And as you can see there, Desmond Ridder played better with this offense, and we saw the progression week in and week out with Desmond Ridder, which is really exciting with Drake London. So look, once again, this offense gets better. The offensive line also improves. They get Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Desmond Ridder, another year in this offense. Drake London hopefully can finally get the full workload, because I feel like he kind of progressed in a little bit until, Marcus Mariota got his feet wet and kind of saw a good rhythm in the second half, and then he got benched. So in my opinion, going as a wide receiver 23 right now, an underdog, which is wild. I have him as my wide receiver 20. I think he's going to be continually moving up my rankings as the season gets closer. So I am believing for Drake London as a top 12 finish this year in the wide receiver with Desmond Ridder. So I'm excited for him.
Yeah, big fan of Drake London, ultimate talent. Let's see if Ridder can be the guy here in 2023. Thank you guys for watching. Let us know what you think about the takes. So drop a like, subscribe if you like fantasy football. And again, let us know in the comments what you think about these breakout candidates. And we'll see you in the next video. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.